Pathetic employees like you don't deserve success. That was the first line. It lit up my phone in neon blue, rude as a horn in a cathedral. Around me, 20,000 people inhaled as one. Nadal tossed the ball into the Paris sky, knee coiled, strings flashing. Philippe Chatrier seemed to lean forward with him. I leaned back. The second buzz came before the ball hit clay. You're fired. Clear your desk by Monday. My name is Jacob Harrison, and after 6 years of building Gravora Group's European division from zero into nearly a third of company revenue, I got fired by text at match point of the French Open. Not a call, not a meeting, not even a fabricated excuse. Just 2 messages from my boss, Riley Denton, the kind of executive who wears power like cologne and treats people like paper cups. Nadal ripped a winner. The crowd detonated. I stared at my phone like it had developed a new language. A man to my left raised an eyebrow. He was mid-50s, tailored suit that didn't try too hard, an old-world watch whose face looked like a moon. I knew that profile. 2 years earlier we'd shaken hands in a fluorescent conference hall in Amsterdam. Everything all right? He asked in an English baritone that smoothed the edges off his consonants. Work, I said. He glanced at the court, then back to me, eyes too observant to pretend. He said, the kind that can spoil tennis. We stood for the trophy ceremony. While applause thundered and champagne corks shot airward, the text on my screen glowed like an ember that wouldn't go out. 8 months earlier, Riley had handed me these tickets in front of the entire company, clapping my shoulder like we were blood. To the Rainmaker, he'd announced after we closed Nexera Labs, 3 years, 12 million. Take Catherine. See Paris. You earned it. I took the tickets. He took the credit at the board meeting. I didn't complain. That was the economy at Gravora. I traded wins for future promises. He traded my wins for present glory. Forgive the imposition, said the man beside me as the crowd began to sift toward the exits, but you look like a man who's just been handed the wrong kind of surprise. I put my phone down screen up, let him read it. His eyebrows climbed a millimeter. It was the most emotion I'd ever seen pass across Gerard Bellamy, chief executive of Lunar Ventures, our fiercest European competitor. Remarkable, he said, and yet useful. Will you let me buy you dinner? I considered pretending dignity. Then I considered reality. I think you just asked to buy my freedom a steak, I said. I'm Jacob, formerly of Gravora. Formerly, he repeated and gave me a handshake that felt more like the opening of a door than the end of a conversation. We walked out under a sky the color of pewter and crossed the Seine behind a caravan of scooters. On the bridge, I called Catherine. She answered on the first ring. How's Paris? She asked, soft and curious. Educational, I said. That bad? That clarifying. She let out a breath I knew meant she was bracing herself for whatever came next and already organizing a plan. I'm here, she said. Tell me everything when you can. And Jacob? Yeah, whatever just happened, they don't get to define you. You do. I tucked her words in my pocket like a talisman and followed Gerard into a restaurant that seemed more candle than electric. The maitre d' knew his name. Of course he did. We didn't waste time. Gerard listened with his whole face, notepad of a brain, pencil of a mouth. He asked smart questions, the kind people ask when they've already intuited the answers and want to see if you'll tell the truth anyway. 6 years, he summarized finally, and the division you built now accounts for 37% of Gravora's top line, roughly, and you have what I would call relationship custody of the clients that produce that revenue. They have my number on their refrigerators, I said. They send pictures of their kids. When their German warehouse floods on a Sunday, they call me. When their CIO retires, they ask me which candidate will actually pick up the phone at 2 a.m. They don't buy a monthly retainer. They buy knowing that when something breaks, Jacob picks up. Gerard nodded. And your Mr. Denton believes he can simply redistribute these relationships to his nephew. Trevor, I said. I tried to keep contempt out of my voice and failed. MBA from a school that rhymes with okay, speaks exactly one language, PowerPoint, and thinks croissants are made with biscuits. Riley installed him as Assistant Director of European Relations 3 weeks ago. So Gerard said, Leaning back, you were fired by text while Riley believes his Berlin transaction is secure. I blinked. Berlin transaction? He lifted a shoulder. Rumors travel. An acquisitive firm sniffing around Gravora's European book. Purchasing the client list, parachuting in professional management, extracting value. The usual lazy play. And they're betting those clients will lay still on the spreadsheet while the ink dries, I said. Yes, Gerard said softly. They always do. On the spreadsheet. We ate. We made a plan that didn't look like revenge on paper, and yet would taste like it when it was done. Slow, deliberate, professional. He offered me a role he'd been carving in his head for a year, director of American expansion, equity on top, because I would be building something, not renting it. It was more money than Riley had promised and then timed incorrectly for 6 years. More importantly, it was ownership. Not legal paperwork, inner posture. 2 conditions, I said. He arched an eyebrow. 1, we do this clean. No stealing proprietary anything. No shortcuts. I call people who already know me and tell them where I am, and they choose. 2, Catherine is part of this calculation. She can keep her practice remote for now, but we will not be jerking our lives around for ego. Done, Gerard said, like he'd already pre-signed the contract. We shook on it, like men who understood that contracts follow trust, not the other way around. I took the last metro back to the hotel, packed, and within 24 hours I was buckled into an overnight from Charles de Gaulle to O'Hare with a signed offer on my phone and a calm inside me that felt like a cleared runway. Monday's sky over Chicago sulked in March gray. Gravora's lobbies smelled like new money and old toner. The glass conference room where reputations were made and unmade was already staged, Riley at the head, Trevor at his right like a bobblehead in training. Patricia from HR with a blue folder and an expression that said she'd argued for a different way this could have gone. Jacob, Riley said, standing like he might hug me. How is Paris? Clarifying, I said, and sat. Patricia slid me the folder. Severance. Mean. Non-disparagement. Expected. Non-compete. Geography limited and, mercifully, domestic. I read everything slowly, made a neat stack, signed where the flags told me to sign. You're taking this well, Riley said, suspicious, like he'd ordered a fight and the kitchen had sensed serenity. Waste of energy, I said. Good luck with Europe. Trevor smirked, the way only a person with no miles on him can smile at a man who's flown through turbulence. I wanted to tell him about the Frankfurt train that died in a snowstorm, about the 12-hour taxi ride that followed and the handshake that happened at dawn because I showed up anyway. I wanted to tell him about the time a Belgian client's mother died, and I went to the funeral because in business, grief is not out of office. I didn't. I shook Patricia's hand instead. She squeezed mine like a person who sees something unfolding and wishes she could reroute it. At my desk, I found a box and put my work life into an object that had once held copier paper. A mug with a crack that looked like a map. A photo of Catherine and me in Prague, her hair doing that halo thing in the wind. A spiral notebook with 1,000 phone numbers that lived in my brain anyway. On the elevator, I took a selfie with my box. I don't know why. Maybe to remember that every ending looks smaller when it fits between 2 handles. In the parking garage, I called my lawyer, Marla Chin, sharp mind, soft laugh, the kind of attorney who would tell you not to waste a bullet in a water fight. Non-compete, she asked. Local only, I said. International company headquartered in London offering you a role that technically isn't a direct competitor even if functionally it is, she said. Correct. You're fine, she said. Don't poke the bear unnecessarily, but legally you're fine. Bill Puster. We'll ignore. You'll build. Copy, I said. At home, Catherine was waiting with soup and questions. I told her everything I could and most of what I couldn't. She listened the way she reads, pen in hand even when there isn't one, annotating with her eyes. When I finished, she set her palm on the table like signing a receipt. We say yes, she said. We move deliberately. We do this right. We clinked spoons. The soup tasted like relief. Tuesday morning, I woke up at 6 by habit and didn't have a reason to. I sat at the kitchen table with coffee and an old-fashioned paper notebook and wrote the names of people who would need to hear from me when they heard about me. The list unspoled like thread: Klaus Faber, Christensen Global, Exacting, Loyal, Marie Dubois, Hollowgate Systems, Genius Wrapped in Impatience, Anita Schoberg, Nordfarm, Meticulous Enough to Count Breaths, Luca Ricci, Faro Vita, Handshake Like a Vice, Ethics Like a Plumb Line, Timo Rantanen, Helio Wind, Suspicious of Anyone Who Didn't Know How to Pronounce Finnish Vowels, Nexera's COO, Eric, who trusted me enough to let me tell him when. His head of IT was lying. 43 names turned into 43 small biographies. Opposite each, I wrote what they feared and what they valued. Under all of them, for words, don't make this about me. At 9:30, my phone chimed. Klaus, Jacob, Guten Morgen. Who is this boy they put on the phone yesterday? He is. What is the phrase? Elevator music. Trevor, I said, neutral. I'm no longer with Gravora. Silence. Then we must talk with urgency, Klaus said. Because our contract is not with Gravora, it is with the version of Gravora that answers when I call. You. I can't solicit, I said. But I can tell you where I am. And how I work doesn't change. Send me a calendar invite, he said, and hung up in the old-fashioned way that means we're men who understand a clock. Marie's message came 5 minutes later. We meet Thursday. Your place or mine? Trevor is allergic to context. I texted back, London works. A thumbs-up bubble popped immediately with French efficiency. By lunch, Eric at Nexera had emailed to ask why a child had tried to explain to him how his own project worked. By 2, Anita had added, if Gravora cannot keep a promise, we will find a firm that can. By 4, my voicemail held 3 messages from Riley, gradations of concern pretending to be magnanimity. I didn't return any of them. Trevor texted at 5, we should grab a beer and talk transition. I stared at the word transition like it was a dog in a suit and turned the phone over. That night, Patricia called from an unlisted number. Can I speak freely? She asked. You always could, I said. Not here, she murmured. Riley backdated Trevor's hiring. Payroll shows him 3 months prior to his first day. He's been intercepting your emails for 6 weeks with a forwarding rule. He told IT you were planning to quit and not to be surprised if you pulled something. And this is hearsay, but from a good source. He's got a letter of intent from a Berlin consulting firm to manage the European client list. Close date 4 weeks out. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling fan like it might spell out a curse word. He's selling the book, I said. He's selling your work, she said. Thank you, I said, because sometimes 2 words are the only weapon you're allowed to hand someone who's standing on a ledge. Give me a place to land, she whispered. If it comes to that. You have one, I said. Wednesday, I flew to London on a ticket I bought with my own card and an odd sense that I was putting myself back in a geography that understood me. Gerard's office sat above a quiet square where pigeons looked like they had opinions. The contract read like a person who'd listened, equity that vested for building something, not simply occupying a seat, a clause that let me walk if the company veered toward practices that violated the way I do business. A relocation stipend with the dignity of no strings attached. I signed with a pen Gerard slid to me that had weight. Catherine FaceTimed me from our kitchen while I held the page up. Nice signature, she said. Make sure they feed you lunch before you start feeding the world. We started feeding immediately. I booked a small room off Bond Street for a week of back-to-back meetings and alternated between espresso and water and the kind of adrenaline that makes you remember what you're for. Klaus arrived precisely on time, sat, and put his phone face up on the table like a draw. I put mine face down like a person who knows he doesn't need it to win. Here is what I require, he said. Continuity. Competence. Not being surprised. You will be bored by how reliable I am, I said. He grunted in a way I'd learned meant approval. Send paper. Marie swept in 30 minutes later like a small storm and kissed both my cheeks in a way that meant, don't you dare make me regret this. I didn't. We traded specifics, rewrote 2 SLA paragraphs she'd hated for years, and she signed on the 3rd page with a flourish. Anita joined by video and drilled me for 60 minutes the way a drill presses steel, straight down, no wobble. We added an audit clause she loved and a penalty clause I suggested because it was fair. She smiled for the first time in 6 years of knowing her. Good, she said. Send. Eric at Nexera asked for a call at night to accommodate San Francisco. They fired you, he said, tone wobbling between disbelief and contempt. Then we're done there. Our agreement is with capability, not a logo. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. We'll transition you with no drama. Do it with drama if it gets me away from Trevor, he said, and we both laughed, something we hadn't done on a business call in a year. By Friday afternoon, 6 contracts totaling $42 million in booked revenue were on lunar letterhead, red lines settled, signatures queued. 3 more were in advanced stages. Gerard walked into the little room at 6 and sat on the edge of the extra chair like a schoolboy in a headmaster's office. I would like to enshrine in company lore, he said, that sometimes the universe writes strategy in your text messages. I slid him the stack. He didn't whoop. He nodded. We'll make the Berlin firm regret learning the word synergy. Monday morning, Gravora began hemorrhaging loudly. Klaus's legal sent a termination letter with language so cold the email shivered. Material change in account management without notice, breach of implied covenant of good faith. Marie requested return of all code artifacts within 48 hours and CC'd her own legal with a subject line that read, transition immediate. Anita suspended a payment pending review of compliance exposures. Eric scheduled a press release about strategic partner realignment. At 9:07 a.m., my phone rang. Riley, what are you doing? He said, like I was spray painting his garage. Working for Lunar, I said. Clients are making choices. You're violating your non-compete. It's domestic and role-specific, I said. London isn't Chicago. Director of American Expansion isn't Director of European Accounts. You can't unspool what we've built. He sounded less angry than Wynn did. You could have called me into a room and said this like a person, I said. You texted me at tennis. This is personal to you, he muttered. It's professional, I said. It always was. That's why it works for me and not for you. He hung up. 10 minutes later, Trevor texted, You're making a mistake. We could have been a team. I didn't reply because the phrase could have been as a hall of mirrors. By Wednesday, Berlin was asking awkward questions about valuation. Rumors said their due diligence team had discovered the European division's revenue line looked like a ski slope. Patricia texted me a single line, board meeting Friday. Wear a seatbelt. Friday afternoon, Gerard poked his head into my London office. We'd upgraded from the borrowed room. They're out, he said. Board voted. Denton gone. Berlin gone. Trevor allegedly gone berserk and then simply gone. I stared at the Thames for a moment because sometimes you need moving water to carry away a feeling that doesn't know where to go. There's more, Gerard said, as if asking permission to make my day weirder. A Ms. Wells emailed our HR. She would like to discuss employment. She attaches. Fascinating documentation. Give her a title that fits her spine, I said. We'll do right by her, he said. Also, Nord Farm wants to expand. They'd like an Oslo pilot. And Klaus recommended us to 2 German firms who think competence is a competitive advantage. Novel, I said. He smiled with his eyes. Build me Boston. Then build me Seattle. 6 months later, Catherine and I stood in the back garden of a row house in Hampstead that had learned to hold sunlight like a trick. We'd just signed. The realtor handed us 2 keys and a bottle of something bubbly. I put the keys in my pocket and the bottle on the counter and called my parents. My mother cried in a way that sounded like wind chimes. My father said, I told you in high school, remember? Good work finds a way to be found. At Lunar, the American expansion had stopped being a slide and become a place. We hired people who didn't need gongs to do their jobs. We wrote a commission plan so clear it felt like a pane of glass. Salespeople from rival firms began sending resumes like paper cranes. Boston opened in a reprised mill building where the floors kept a memory of boots. Seattle opened in a space where you could see rain coming an hour away. Patricia took over European operations with a steadiness that made drama redundant. She'd kept copies of emails with timestamps that rewrote history back to true. When Gravora's lawyers tried to snarl about interference, she forwarded 3 messages Riley had sent to Berlin months before my firing. We will transition Jacob's accounts under my nephew's leadership. He is pliable. The word pliable turned out to be expensive when it appeared in Discovery. Tyler, my old colleague in Raleigh, from a different story in my life, sent a LinkedIn message that simply read, "Proud of you." Not surprised. I stared at it for a long time because sometimes grace comes from old rooms. Riley? I didn't Google him. Catherine saw him bagging groceries once back in Chicago and told me later, careful as a person carrying a hot pan. I shrugged. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. Revenge is an exhausting diet. Building fed me better. The following June, Roland Garros returned to Paris. Gerard sent me 2 tickets and a note that said, "Some anniversaries matter." We watched from Lunar's hospitality suite where the strawberries tasted like they were grown on the court. When Nadal raised the trophy for the 14th time, the crowd unraveled itself into prayer and applause. I looked at the baseline where I'd read my firing a year before and felt nothing but gratitude for the way a door shutting had sounded like a lock clicking on a better house. After the match, I walked out to the plaza and called Klaus. He answered on the second ring. "How is Paris?" he asked. "Full," I said. "How is confidence?" he said, and I could hear the dry smile. "Boring," I said. "In the best way." "Good," he said, and hung up in the way old men in good suits end calls when everything important has already been said. If you want a list of how to do what I did, I can't give you one. It wasn't a plan as much as a set of beliefs I refused to negotiate even when the spreadsheet said I should. Pick up the phone at 2 a.m. when the customer calls. Take the meeting in person when it would be cheaper not to. Learn enough of the language to order coffee and apologize without making the apology about you. Hire people who take notes, not credit. Write the commission plan like you'd want it written if you were 28 and hungry. Put your wife's name at the center of the map, not at the margins. And when someone tells you by text that you're pathetic, understand that the insult is a mirror they're holding to their own fear. Put the phone down. Finish watching the point. Shake the hand that shows up beside you. Say yes to the door that opens. The rest takes care of itself, not because life is fair, but because clarity is a kind of gravity. Things that belong together find one another when you stop trying to staple them into place. I still have Riley's 2 texts saved, not because I need souvenirs, but because I sometimes show them to new managers at Lunar on their first day. I hand them my phone across a table and wait while they read. Then I tell them the only speech I've ever memorized. This is how not to do it. We won't build a company that does. We will lose the occasional deal rather than lose our way. And we will be exactly the kind of boring that keeps promises. They usually smile the way people do when they hope you mean it. Then they go to their desks and write emails with subject lines like "next steps" and "thanks for your time," and as promised, here's the plan. It isn't glamorous, but it is faithful, and faithful beats glamorous when the servers go down at 3:17 a.m. The French have a phrase for a thing that had to happen the way it happened to become what it is. Il faut. It had to be. Not destiny, more like geometry. The line had to pass through the point because that's where the point was. The text, the dinner, the contract, the calls, the slow, ordinary victory that looks from a distance like a miracle. It wasn't a miracle. It was work. It was help. It was a wife who said, "They don't get to define you," and a competitor who acted like a collaborator and clients who chose people over logos and a woman in HR who documented the truth when truth cost. It was the long way around that turned out to be the shortest path to a place that felt like mine. And it started with the worst kind of message arriving at the best possible time. Sometimes the door out is a text that says there isn't a door. Sometimes the door is a Brit with a moon-faced watch and a dinner reservation. Sometimes the door is your own voice saying yes with both feet. Either way, you walk through.